Hi everyone, it's William with today, not with a video in my Grand Duke Dmitri Pavlovich series, but a video in my new limited series on books that I think every Christian should read. And just a recap from the first episode. My own perspective is Greek Orthodox. I'm a Greek Orthodox Christian. And the books that I talked about last time were the great Dostoevsky novel, The Brothers Karamazov, and then Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, and then finally Sergei Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, all of which have had a huge impact on me. And almost all of these books I talked about in an earlier series that I tried to do on death in literature. That one didn't get enough traction to keep going with, though maybe I'll return to it later. It remains to be seen about this one, but anyway, I'm you viewers who watch both of those will think I've only read 20 novels in my life, but these are all books that impacted me in a huge way and from different perspectives. So so the books we're looking at today are the massive novel Joseph and His Brothers by Thomas Mann, the German writer, and then we have a French writer, Albert Camus, famously an existentialist, and his novel The Plague, and then after that we have we're going to England, and India by way of England. And we have Rudyard Kipling's novel, Kim. So on the surface, none of these really look like they're related to Christianity, but the closest would probably be Joseph and His Brothers, because it comes from a Bible story. But Camus was, I believe, an atheist, and Kim is about a boy, an English boy, who becomes the disciple of a lama, a Tibetan Buddhist lama. But anyway, let's start with Joseph and His Brothers. And one of the things that I talked about in the first video was that I was looking at these books from the perspective of kenotic love, the kind of love where you pour yourself out, you're willing to empty yourself into another person, whether other people or that other person are willing to fill you with their own love or not. You're willing to empty yourself out for them. So that's an Orthodox tradition. But I'm also looking at books that are relevant to Christianity in other ways, and Joseph and His Brothers is not really there are very touching relationships in Joseph and His Brothers, very touching, in particular between Joseph and the major domo whom Joseph ends up replacing in the house of Potiphar when that man dies, and that man is Montka, he's called, and very, very touching relationship between Joseph and Montka, a sort of father-son relationship. But what really is the great love affair, well, bad choice of words, but in the great example of love in Mann's Joseph and His Brothers is the relationship between Joseph and God, one of the most extraordinary that I've ever seen in any work of fiction. So the book is very long. You can divide it, and it has sometimes been divided into 4 novels, or you can buy it as a single novel, and beginning with the simplest part of it, which is how it depicts these famous stories from the Bible. not just the story of Joseph and his brothers, but also the story of Jacob and Esau, and Rachel and Leah, and even going back to Isaac, just incredibly presented by Thomas Mann. You know, pretty much in keeping with the biblical accounts, and he did extensive research not only into the Christian but also the Muslim and Jewish views of these stories. And so that's already in itself one big reason to read them. But the other is, this incredible relationship between Joseph and God. And God does not appear as a character in the novel, although there are angels and envoys from God, but Joseph's understanding of his relationship to God and his devotion are incredibly touching. And you also have the idea of how people in that part of the world at that time, how they thought about things like time and the recurrence of patterns, and how the stories of the Bible and people's beliefs fit into those at a much deeper level than anything that you're going to get from looking at having sort of a sola scriptura and a biblical literalism. These are stories that are not dead, but full of life, full of creativity, completely dynamic. And that appeals to me very much as an Orthodox Christian, because I think within Orthodoxy, the mystical is a little closer to the surface. This is not to say that there are not mystical aspects of other Christian confessions. It's not to say that the average Orthodox Christian, the average devout Orthodox Christian, is necessarily tuned in to the mystical or the panentheistic aspect of Orthodox Christianity. The only thing I'm saying is that the mystical path is a little closer to the surface in Eastern Christianity, as it is in other Christian, not Christian, but non-Christian faiths in the East. Orthodox Christianity probably in some ways has more in common with, say, Buddhism than it has with, say, Protestantism. So that's interesting, and this idea of panentheism, not pantheism, but the book fully embraces that. The idea that some of nature spirits and that sort of thing are part of God's overall creation, and I love that about the book. So there are so many reasons to read this book from a Christian perspective, and not to be scandalized by it, but to be open-minded about a kind of Christianity that is still very much centered on the relationship with God, but also in a creative and dynamic way that's sometimes missing, especially from more legalistic forms of Christianity. But I didn't undertake this series in order to criticize people. So anyway, I could talk about Joseph and his brothers for hours, but I've almost talked almost 10 minutes about it, so need to move on. See if we can get through all three books, but for sure La Plague, Albert Camus' famous book, or La Peste, I'm sorry, in English, The Plague, that had this huge surge of popularity during the COVID lockdown, which makes a lot of sense because it involves a quarantine of a whole city with armed guards around the perimeter of the city Oran, and nobody allowed to get out, some people risking it and being shot or managing the escape. So it had that in common with COVID-19. But what is the Christian angle to it? As I said, Camus was an atheist. One of the characters in the book, a secondary character, is a Jesuit priest. And when the bubonic plague breaks out in Oran. The book was written in 1947, by the way. When it breaks out, the priest initially treats it as a punishment from God and gives this rather severe sermon, that alienates some people and causes other people to behave badly. But the priest himself comes to see things differently and gives a second sermon and plays a sacrificial role himself. And the book really is about playing a sacrificial role from love. So you have some characters who are intent upon to do everything they can to escape from Oran, who change their minds and decide that they can't leave. They can't leave the people who are suffering and dying and the whole situation. So there's the depiction of the death of a child, which is one of the most agonizing I've ever seen, but not at all gratuitous. And the way it affects people and the way it affects their view, whether, in a constructive or destructive way about the meaning of life and God. So, Camus, like the other authors I'm talking about, does not pull his punches when it comes to saying these are the things we have to confront, whether it's possible to find a solution or not. And as in the Brothers Karamazov, there's no solution in the sense of we can end suffering, but there is a solution in the sense of we can live in a way that does give life meaning. A very touching book with several characters that are very touching. And I recommend it highly. And I think Camus' daughter made a statement during the lockdown about how this book is about people, how an event like that can bring out the best or the worst in people, and how it models people behaving in a way that puts other people first. Okay, so finally, I guess we have time to do the last book, Kim. So as I said, Kim may sound like an odd choice because the title character, Kimball O'Hara, is an English boy, but he's an orphan. He was born in India. He was orphaned at a very early age and brought up by an Indian woman, not an educated woman. And he's just he's a street boy. He's a feral child. When he goes missing, the woman who has been paid for at first by his father after the mother died, and then just because we don't know. I mean, she's I can't comment on her because she's not presented as even really a secondary character in the novel. You just know that she existed. So anyway, why Kim? Kim is about a close, it's about many things. I mean, definitely about the great game, the rivalry between Russia and Britain in that part of the world, and the British, the British goal of keeping Russia out of India, and Kim is brought into this. Even though he's a child, he's brought into this because he's so observant and so able to penetrate into any kind of group of people that he is utilized as a spy. But he is attached he becomes attached to this Tibetan Lama who's wandering around looking for a sacred river, not the Ganges, but a sacred river that he's had a vision of. And Kim attaches himself to him initially just because he finds him sort of a curiosity, and he loves to travel around and meet new people and that sort of thing. So he attaches himself to this man, to this elderly Tibetan Lama, and the relationship that is then formed between them is just incredible. And again, a relationship of love, though neither character is going to say, I love this person, but they show it in their actions and the extent to which they care for each other. And in the Lama's case, it's an interesting dilemma for him because he believes very strongly in compassion and in empathy, but on the other hand, he doesn't, he's uncomfortable with the idea of love as forming an attachment. But, you know, that is what happens with him and Kim, and the fact that he is struggling against the idea of attachment, I think actually makes the relationship stronger. And, you know, if you want to read a book about a relationship that, you know, with any religious faith would be looked upon as one that models love, then this is an excellent book to read. So I will stop there. With all three books, I could say so much. With Joseph and His Brothers, of course, I gave it 10 minutes, so it kind of shortchanged the other two. But anyway, yeah, I hope you'll come back next time. I did not. I forgot to look at my list to see what the next 3 books will be, so I'll put those in the description. If you want to decide whether you're going to watch the next video, then you'll see not only the titles of these 3 books that we talked about, but also the 3 next books. And thank you for watching, and I certainly hope to see you next time. Bye.